What if I told you that the most ruthless, high-stakes battlefield in 19th century England wasn't Waterloo?
Oh, wow. Okay, where was it?
It was a London ballroom. And, the deadliest weapon wasn't a cavalry charge or a musket. It was a 17-year-old girl armed with a quill and a printing press.
That framing completely shifts how you view the era, actually.
Right.
Because we tend to look back at the Regency period through this soft focus lens of romance and politeness. But beneath the string quartets and the polite curtsies, you are basically looking at a brutal arena of survival.
Survival, reputation, socioeconomic warfare, all of it.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what we are dissecting today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We have synthesized a really fascinating stack of sources for this one.
Yeah, cultural critiques, historical analyses of the Regency marriage market, and even some showrunner interviews.
Yeah, to figure out the psychological and sociological mechanisms driving the massive cultural phenomenon that is Bridgerton.
Because we're going way beyond the basic plot summaries here.
Oh, absolutely. You already know the characters, you know the drama. Today, our mission is to uncover why this specific brand of high society tension has, a complete chokehold on our modern collective psyche.
Well, the initial draw of the series is obvious, right? I mean, it's a visual feast.
Total eye candy.
The audience comes for the immaculate wisteria draped over grand estates, the empire waist gowns, the sheer escapism of a world where your biggest stated problem is the color of a ribbon.
Yeah, but as the sociological critiques in our sources point out, you don't sustain a global obsession with aesthetics alone.
No, you really don't. Viewers stay because the underlying architecture of this world, the relentless surveillance, the anxiety of public perception, the performance of identity, it mirrors our modern digital lives with terrifying accuracy.
Seriously. You might be listening to this thinking, I have nothing in common with the Duke in 1813. But look at the societal pressures. These characters are agonizing over who was seeing, talking to whom, analyzing the micro-expressions of their peers, and living in constant fear of a public scandal that could ruin their family's standing.
It's so relatable.
The Grand Ballroom is literally just the 19th century equivalent of the internet. They just swapped out viral tweets for whispered gossip behind feathered fans.
And to really understand how that social chessboard operates, our sources direct us to the primary tension driving the narrative.
Ah, yes.
The stark contrast between the Bridgerton family and the Featherington family. Because they aren't just neighbors, they represent two completely different strategies for surviving a hyper-competitive ecosystem.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the mechanics of that rivalry create an incredible amount of narrative tension.
They really do.
So you have the Bridgertons, guided by their mother Violet, who possesses this incredibly radical philosophy for the era. She wants her children to marry for love.
Which, let's be honest, in the 1800s was essentially a fairy tale concept.
Completely. Marriage was a corporate merger.
Right. It was about consolidating land, wealth, and titles. To demand love in that equation was a massive luxury.
And luxury is the operative word there. The Bridgertons can afford to prioritize love because they already possess vast, unshakable capital.
Financial and social.
Exactly. Our historical notes emphasize that their security is literally woven into their wardrobe. They consistently wear soft, muted blues, pale pinks, elegant silvers.
It's the Regency equivalent of quiet luxury. They don't need to shout to announce they own the room.
Yeah, but then you look across the square at the Featheringtons, and it's a completely different socioeconomic reality.
Totally different.
The Featheringtons are on the brink of financial ruin. They lack inherent social capital, so they are forced to hustle. And I want to introduce a modern comparison here that I think perfectly explains their visual presentation.
Okay, let's hear it.
The Featherington wardrobe. The blinding citrus yellows, the harsh oranges, the aggressive greens. It's not just bad taste. It is 19th century SEO keyword stuffing.
I love that analogy. Explain the mechanics of that.
Okay, so think about someone desperate to go viral on a social media algorithm today.
Right.
They use the most obnoxious thumbnail, they put words in all caps, they do ridiculous stunts. They are optimizing for visibility because obscurity equals death.
Wow, yes.
The Featherington matriarch is doing the exact same thing with her daughters. She is dressing them in the loudest possible colors to ensure they catch the eye of the queen, or a lord, or anyone with money.
She is trying to hack the societal algorithm because she doesn't have the organic reach of the Bridgertons.
Exactly. That fundamentally reframes the Featheringtons from being simply tacky to being deeply tragically desperate.
And that desperation fuels the tension. But whether you are relying on the quiet luxury of the Bridgertons or the algorithm hacking of the Featheringtons, every single player in this society answers to an unseen, omnipotent narrator.
Lady Whistledown, the anonymous gossip columnist who essentially functions as the god of this universe. A single drop of ink from her can elevate a debutante to the highest ranks of nobility or
exile an entire family from society permanently.
Right.
Gossip is a fascinating sociological tool. Historically, as our sources point out, gossip has always been a weapon of the disenfranchised. Meaning, if you don't have hard power, like you don't have wealth, you don't have land, and in this patriarchal society, you don't have male privilege, you have to rely on soft power.
And information is soft power.
Exactly. Lady Whistledown creates a panopticon effect in London. Everyone polices their own behavior because they believe they are always being watched by her.
And the brilliance of the narrative is that the architect of this panopticon is the person society ignores the most. Penelope Featherington.
Such a good twist.
Let's unpack the psychology of Penelope, because she is not just writing a newsletter. She is balancing a double life that requires, sociopathic levels of compartmentalization.
What's fascinating here is that Penelope's internal conflict is really the emotional core of the gossip network.
Yeah.
She is highly intelligent, hyper-observant, but because she doesn't fit the rigid beauty standards of her era, and because her family's SEO strategy makes her look ridiculous, society renders her invisible.
She's a total wallflower.
Right. So by creating Lady Whistledown, Penelope is basically weaponizing her own invisibility.
I'd take that a step further, honestly.
Yeah.
She's in just weaponizing her invisibility. She's commodifying the hypocrisy of the people who ignore her.
Oh, that's a great point.
The nobility treat her like the furniture, so they speak freely around her. She takes their secrets, packages them, and sells them back to them.
But the tragedy is that her soft power traps her.
Yes. She builds this immense influence to protect herself, but the machinery of the gossip column demands constant fuel. Eventually, she has to burn the people she actually cares about just to keep the illusion alive.
Which brings us to the most painful irony of her character. Penelope sees the absolute worst of everyone in London, yet she harbors this incredibly pure, unrequited love for Colin Bridgerton.
Colin. Oh, Colin.
Right.
The man who has traveled the entire European continent, but lacks the basic situational awareness to see the woman standing right in front of him.
Seriously.
But, rather than just writing Colin off as oblivious, I think his blindness is actually a symptom of his privilege.
How do you mean?
Well, Colin operates from a place of supreme Bridgerton security. He doesn't have to analyze the subtext of conversations or read the room the way Penelope does because his survival doesn't depend on it.
Right, because he has wealth, he's a man, he's attractive.
Exactly. He takes interactions strictly at face value. Penelope is playing three-dimensional chess, and Colin is just enjoying a nice walk through the park. He literally lacks the psychological vocabulary to recognize Penelope's multifaceted identity.
That is a crucial distinction. It's an empathy gap born of privilege.
For sure.
Now, if Penelope survives the surveillance state by becoming the Watcher, how do the other characters survive it? This leads us directly to the psychological mechanics of the fake relationship. Specifically, looking at Daphne Bridgerton and Simon Bassett in the first season.
The fake dating trope. We all know the setup. Daphne needs to look highly sought after to boost her stock on the marriage market.
And Simon, the Duke of Hastings, has deep childhood trauma regarding his abusive father.
Right. He's sworn off marriage and wants ambitious mothers to stop throwing their daughters at him. So they pretend to court, solving both their problems. It is the oldest trick in the romance playbook.
It is, but our sources highlight why this narrative device has such a profound psychological grip on the audience.
Okay, why?
It's not just a cute setup, it's a structural hack for vulnerability. The fake dating ruse strips away the paralyzing anxiety of rejection.
Oh, I see.
Because Simon and Daphne have agreed that the relationship is a performance, they drop their defensive walls. They don't have to perform the rigid, polite perfection required by society when they are alone together. They can be sarcastic, honest, messy, because they believe the stakes are zero.
Okay, I have to jump in here and push back on the idea of Simon's underlying logic.
Okay, go for it.
The psychological analysis in our notes says Simon utilized the fake relationship as a defense mechanism, a way to maintain absolute control over his autonomy because of his trauma. But was he ever actually in control, or was this just a massive delusion from day one?
I would argue he was in control of his intentions.
Oh, really?
Yeah. His vow to never marry or produce an heir was a calculated strike against his father's legacy. He viewed the ruse as a purely strategic chess move. He actually believed his trauma made him immune to emotional attachment.
But that completely ignores the environmental conditioning of what he was actually doing.
Yeah.
You cannot rationally outthink biological and psychological proximity. Let's look at the reality of their ruse. They are spending hours alone together. They are sharing conspiratorial whispers, building inside jokes against the rest of society.
It's true.
They are physically holding each other during intricately choreographed dances in candlelit rooms. Simon thought he could build a psychological wall, but he willingly stepped into an environment designed entirely to dismantle that wall. You can't stand in a downpour and logically deduce why you shouldn't get wet.
Okay, when you frame it around the environmental stimuli, you're right. The physical environment of the Regency courtship ritual totally overrode his cognitive defenses, and the sources actually point to the dance choreography as the ultimate catalyst for this.
Right.
In a highly restrictive society where physical touch is heavily policed, dancing is the only socially sanctioned outlet for physical intimacy.
Exactly. When you are not allowed to say what you truly feel, your body language carries the entire weight of your emotional state.
A gloved hand on a waist or the sustained eye contact during a waltz becomes incredibly charged.
So charged. The choreography is a metaphor for their relationship, really, bound by the strict geometric rules of society on the outside, but brimming with raw, chaotic emotion on the inside.
Wow, yeah. So Daphne hacks the marriage market using the rules to her advantage. But what happens when a character fundamentally rejects the concept of the market altogether, yet is forced to govern it?
Oh, man.
That brings us to Anthony Bridgerton and the crushing burden of duty.
If Daphne's story is about hacking the system, Anthony's story is about being completely pulverized by it.
Yeah.
After his father's sudden death, Anthony's thrust into the role of the Viscount. He becomes the patriarch. He is entirely responsible for the financial and social survival of his mother and his 7 siblings.
We are looking at a textbook case of parentification trauma here. Anthony internalizes the panic of his father's death and decides that vulnerability is a fatal flaw.
Yeah, to be a strong leader, he believes he must operate as a machine. Love is a liability because love requires emotional risk.
And he cannot afford any risk that might destabilize his family.
So he approaches finding a wife like he's interviewing candidates for a middle management position at a bank. He wants a purely transactional marriage. And then he meets Kate Sharma.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Kate is the ultimate disruption to Anthony's algorithm. She is intelligent, fiercely independent, and crucially, she operates under the exact same trauma-induced delusion that Anthony does.
Oh, absolutely.
Kate has completely martyred herself for her younger sister, Edwina. She's decided that her own desires, her own future, and her own happiness are entirely irrelevant compared to securing Edwina's future.
This is where the psychological mirroring becomes so explosive. Why do Anthony and Kate have such incredible volatile tension? Why do they argue every single time they are in a room together?
Right? It's not just banter.
No. It's because when Anthony looks at Kate, he is looking into a mirror and he hates what he sees.
That's a profound way to look at it. They're both so deeply entrenched in their self-sacrifice that recognizing it in someone else is infuriating. The tension between them is built almost entirely on the massive volume of things they refuse to say.
Yes.
They can't admit their fears, so they project their anger onto each other.
It's the ultimate enemies to lovers dynamic, rooted in psychological projection. They argue fiercely about a hunting dog or like the rules of a lawn game because they cannot argue about the actual issue.
Which is that they are terrified of their own desires.
Yes. They glare at each other across ballrooms with this suffocating intensity because letting down their guard would mean admitting that their entire philosophy of self-sacrifice is flawed.
And that leads to a much broader point about the series as a whole. Anthony and Kate's struggle highlights how the traditions of the Regency era function as literal cages.
Totally.
The rules dictate who you can love, how you must act, and what your future holds based entirely on your birth order and gender.
Oh.
Which perfectly sets up how Bridgerton, both within the narrative and in its actual production, actively rebels against those cages.
We have to talk about Eloise Bridgerton in this context. While the rest of London is agonizing over the marriage market, Eloise recognizes it for exactly what it is.
An institutional trap designed to strip women of their autonomy.
Exactly. She doesn't want a husband. She wants a university education. She wants the freedom that her brothers take for granted. Her obsession isn't courtship. Her obsession is unmasking Lady Whistledown.
Because Whistledown represents the only woman in their society who has successfully seized power.
Right.
Eloise is essentially the surrogate for the modern viewer. She is the voice of contemporary feminism dropped directly into 1813.
Yep.
But Eloise's internal rebellion against societal norms is actually a microcosm of how the show itself rebels against the conventions of the historical drama genre.
Oh, I love this part. If we connect this to the bigger picture, traditionally, historical dramas have a reputation for being somewhat clinical.
Very formal.
Yeah, they are deeply concerned with strict historical accuracy, the exact thread count of a costume, the specific dialect. They can feel very formal, almost like watching a museum exhibit come to life.
But the showrunners made a calculated stylistic choice to inject modernity directly into the veins of the Regency setting.
They're good.
They do this visually through a diverse, inclusive cast that reimagines the racial dynamics of the nobility, creating an alternative history that feels reflective of today's audience. But the most visceral tool of rebellion is undoubtedly the soundtrack.
The Vitamin String Quartet covers.
Sure.
Oh my gosh. The music in this show is nothing short of a neurological hack.
It really is.
You're watching a scene with actors in corsets and cravats moving through a highly formalized dance, but the violins are playing a massive contemporary pop song. You hear Ariana Grande or Billie Eilish or Nirvana played on classical instruments.
The cognitive dissonance that creates is just brilliant. From a psychological standpoint, the classical instrumentation, the cello, the violin signals to your brain, we're in the past, this is history, this is distant.
Right.
But the melody of a modern pop song instantly triggers your own contemporary emotional memories associated with that music. It forcibly bridges the gap between 1813 and today.
It subliminally tells the viewer that the heartbreak, the lust, and the anxiety these characters are feeling are the exact same emotions you feel right now.
Exactly, and that musical bridge is the exact mechanism that turned the show from a popular series into a global internet phenomenon. By making the history emotionally accessible, it exploded onto platforms like TikTok and Instagram.
It wasn't just a show to watch, it became an aesthetic to inhabit. It revived the historical romance genre for an entire generation who suddenly found themselves analyzing corsets, recreating makeup looks, and fiercely debating the psychological motivations of 19th century fictional aristocrats.
It proved that audiences don't want a sterile history lesson. They want a mirror. They want to see their own messy, complex, emotional lives reflected back at them, even if that mirror is framed in gold and velvet.
So well said. So synthesizing all of this, from the SEO-driven wardrobe of the Featheringtons to the panopticon of Lady Whistledown and the trauma bonding of Anthony and Kate, what is the ultimate takeaway from this cultural deep dive?
I think if there is a unifying theory to Bridgerton, it is a profound warning about the danger of assumptions. The social chessboard demands that everyone wear a mask, and the mask is almost always a lie. A person who projects absolute confidence and rigid control, like Anthony or Simon, is often the one internally drowning in insecurity and fear.
And vice versa. The person whose society deems entirely insignificant, the wallflower, the quiet girl in the corner like Penelope, might actually be holding the strings to the entire empire.
Yes.
It is a reminder that power doesn't always look like a crown. Sometimes it looks like a quill.
Exactly. The show constantly demands that we look past the performance. It shows us that everyone is fighting a complex psychological battle behind their polite smiles and perfect posture. The glamorous dresses and the lavish balls are the hook, sure, but the fragility of trust, the desperate search for identity, and the devastating consequences of miscommunication are what keep us invested.
Because those are not Regency-era problems. Those are human problems.
Precisely. And they are problems that haven't faded in the last 200 years. They've just migrated to different platforms. We still police each other. We still perform our identities. And we still desperately want to be seen for who we really are beneath the armor we wear.
Which leaves us with a lot to consider about our own modern social chessboards.
Yeah, it certainly does.
So as we close the carriage door on our trip to Regency London today, I want you to think about your own life right now. Think about your group chats, your workplace politics, the social circles you navigate every day. If you were dropped into the middle of a Bridgerton ball tonight, standing under the blinding light of 100 crystal chandeliers, what is the one tightly guarded secret you hold that you'd be most terrified of Lady Whistledown discovering and printing for the whole world to read?
Oh, wow. That is a genuinely terrifying thought experiment.
Something to keep you awake while you listen to some pop songs played on the cello. We will see you on the next Deep Dive.